Hello everyone, welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah share. We're holding Mishnah Berurah Chelik Beis, and we'll be learning today, Mitzvah Hashem, Daf Lamed Vav Amud Aleph. We are continuing to learn Hilchos Beis HaKnesses. We pick up today, second line from the top on Lamed Vav Amud Aleph in the Shulchan Aruch, Siman Kuf Nun Gimel Sif Vav. Says the Mechaber, Moichrim Beis HaKnesses, we can sell a shul, V'chein sha'ar dvarim shebekdusha, as well as other dvarim shebekdusha. So let's say an Aron Kodesh, a bima, even a Sefer Torah. Says the Mechaber, va'afilu Sefer Torah, even a Sefer Torah. So we could sell any dvarim shebekdusha lahaspakas talmidim, in order to support talmidei chachamim who are learning Torah, ay lahasi yisaimim bedamav, or to marry off orphans. And these we will see, we're speaking of both orphan boys and orphan girls, bedamav, with the proceeds of selling these dvarim shebekdusha. So here in Siman Kuf Nun Gimel, we've learned previously that when you sell dvarim shebekdusha, there are restrictions on what you're allowed to do with the monies. We said that when you sell any davar shebekdusha, when you take the proceeds, you have to level up the proceeds in kedusha. You're not allowed to level down the proceeds in kedusha. So we said when you sell a Beis HaKnesses, you have to take the proceeds and you have to level them up. So you sell a shul, you could level up and you could use the proceeds to build an Aron Kodesh, certainly to buy a Sefer Torah. But you always have to level up. We even saw the question whether or not you're allowed to sell one davar shebekdusha and use the proceeds for something on the same level of kedusha. We saw yesh oisrim v'yesh matirim. So generally speaking, whenever we sell a davar shebekdusha, we want to level up. Here in Sivav comes along the Mechaber and he tells us, but for haspakas talmidim, if we have to support people who are learning Torah or to marry off orphan children, then you could sell any davar shebekdusha and you could use the proceeds for those purposes. Says the Mishnah Berurah Katan Chaf Gimel, va'afilu Sefer Torah, you're even allowed to sell a Sefer Torah, which is the highest level of kedusha. You're even allowed to sell a Sefer Torah for these purposes. Says the Chavetz Chaim Hatam, the reason for this is, and this is a very strange couple of lines in the Mishnah Berurah that I puzzled over for a while, and I'll tell you right now I don't have an answer. Hatam, the reason for this is, says the Chavetz Chaim, to ha'amrinan, because we say, ein moichrin Sefer Torah, you're not allowed to sell a Sefer Torah, ella limud Torah, only for the purposes of learning Torah. Mashma, the implication is, the limud Torah, that in order to facilitate the learning of Torah, mutar afilu limkar Sefer Torah, it's permissible even to sell a Sefer Torah. Now, when I say that I'm puzzled by these couple of lines of the Mishnah Berurah, it's because the Mishnah Berurah is essentially quoting a Gemara from Megillah Daf Chav Zayin Amud Aleph. And the Gemara in Megillah Daf Chav Zayin Amud Aleph says the following. It says, Amar Rabbi Yochanan Mishum Reb Meir, Rabbi Yochanan said in the name of Reb Meir, Ein moichrin Sefer Torah, you don't sell a Sefer Torah, ela lilmud Torah, only for the purposes of learning Torah, valisa isha, and to marry a woman. Okay, Rashi says over here, lilmud Torah, lehisparnes bai, in order to be supported by the proceeds of the sale, kishaloi Torah, when you're learning Torah. So we have a beferish Gemara over here that says that you sell a Sefer Torah in order to be able to learn Torah, to be supported by the proceeds in order to learn Torah. Says the Mishnah Berurah quotes that Gemara, the ha'amrinan ein moichrin Sefer Torah ela lilmud Torah, and then he says, mashma, the Gemara implies the lilmud Torah, that in order to facilitate the learning of Torah, mutar afilu limkar Sefer Torah, it's mutar even to sell a Sefer Torah. What do you mean it's mashma? It says it beferish. So I don't understand what the Chavetz Chaim says over here. He brings this down from the Tshuvas Harash, Ayin Sham Sheherich Bazeh. Now you would tell me that the natural first thing that you have to do is take a look at the Tshuvas Harash, and that's true. But I didn't have a Tshuvas Harash handy, so I haven't looked at the Tshuvas Harash yet. But I will tell you that in Dirshu footnote number 25, he brings down the Tshuvas Arash. Now, certainly he's not bringing down the whole Tshuvas Arash, so maybe he says something else that we need to see. But if you take a look at Dirshu footnote number 25, what do they bring down? The Kasav Sham, the Rush writes over there, Sheyesera Mailo Yisaloim De Torah, the Maila, the virtue of people who learn Torah is even greater, Mimalas Sefer Torah, from the Milas and the greatness of a Sefer Torah, Kimavur B'Gemara, like it's spelled out in the Gemara, Makas Chav Beis Amud Beis, where the Gemara says, Kama Tipshoi Shar Inshi, how foolish are many people. The Kaimi Mikamer Sefer Torah, where they stand up in honor of a Sefer Torah, V'loi Kaimi Mikami Gavra Rabba, but they don't stand up in honor of a great Talmid Chacham. Umat Tagelas Yesh B'Knias Svarim V'Torah, what purpose is there in the purchase of Svarim and Sifrei Torah, Im Loi Kedei Lilmod Bahem, if not that they should be used to learn from. Umidvar of Elu Lamad Abir Halacha Le'el, from these words of the Tshuvas Arash, the Bir Halacha learns, Shetzibur She'en Lehem Beis Medrash, if you have a tzibur that doesn't have a Beis HaMedrash, where people could congregate to learn Torah, Kaifim B'nei O'ir Elu Es Elu Livnoisai, the townspeople could force each other to spend money to build a Beis HaMedrash, because what's the point of having Sifrei Torah and Sifrei Kedusha if you don't have a Beis HaMedrash to learn in? So it seems that the Tshuvas Arash is busy extolling the virtues of limud HaTorah and the virtues of Hachzakas limud HaTorah. But again, this halacha that you could sell the Sefer Torah to facilitate and support the learning of Torah seems to be spelled out in the Gemara in Megillah Chav Zayin Amud Aleph. We don't need to come on to a mashmois. Continues the Mishnah Berurah over here, nice cut in Chav Gimel. The davar zeh terchachas megula. This concept is an open rebuke. La'osan ha'anashim, to those people ha'misrashlin lahachzik Torah ba'arein, who are weak in supporting Torah in their cities. You see over here that we would even sell a Sefer Torah in order to support the learning of Torah. So it's an open rebuke, he says, to those who are lax in Hachzakas HaTorah. Okay, so the first halacha we had over here in Sivav is that you sell a Shul, you sell all Dvarim Shebekdusha, you would sell even a Sefer Torah, lahaspakas talmidim, to support people who are learning Torah with the proceeds of the sale. The second halacha was Oyla Hasi Yisaimim, or to marry off orphans from the proceeds of the sale. So Hachnasas Kala, with the proceeds of the sale of Dvarim Shebekdusha. Says the Mishnah Berurah Katan Chav Dalet, Oyla Hasi Yisaimim. Yisaimim literally means male orphans. Says the Chavetz Chaim, Va'afilu Yisaimois. This pertains to Achnasas Kala as well, to marrying off girls, to marrying off female orphans. Why is this a chiddush? Because the truth is, it's a man that has the chiyuv of period of prur revu. A man is commanded to have children. That's a chiyuv on the man. So a man is a chiyuv to go get married and be Isaac in period of Arivia and have children. A woman is not. So it's a chiddush to say over here, you want to tell me that we'll sell Dvarim Shebekdusha in order to facilitate a man getting married. Okay, that's because he has a chiyuv of prur revu. But the fact that we should sell Dvarim Shebekdusha in order to facilitate a woman getting married, that seems to be a bigger chiddush. Still in all, says the Mishnah Berurah, that is the halacha. Va'afilu yisaimais, and he explains why. Because even though a woman doesn't have the chiyuv of prur revu, mikam makayim, there is another chiyuv to get married, and that is, we learn out from the pasuk in Yeshaya, Lasheves Yitzara. The Rabbeinu Shalom created the world not so that it should be empty, Lasheves Yitzara, so that it should be inhabited and it should be functioning. V'loy l'tayu vara. The Rabbeinu Shalom didn't create the world so that it should be empty and not be used. He created the world Lasheves. It should be inhabited and there should be a functioning society. And that is incumbent upon a woman also. So in that way, a woman also has a certain level of a chiyuv to reproduce and to keep the world inhabited. So Lasheves Yitzara Shaykh Kam Be'isha. V'hu adin, the same halacha applies, says the Chavetz Chaim. V'hu adin demoichrin Sefer Torah. We would sell a Sefer Torah lepidyon shvuyim. If Deber Chas v'Chalila, a Yid, was taken captive, we would sell a Sefer Torah in order to raise the money for a pidyon shvuyim. And he brings this down from the Magen Avram. V'chein hiskim ha'el Yerabba b'shem kama paiskim, and the El Yerabba agrees to this as well in the name of many paiskim. So it's not only for haspakas talmidim, it's not only for marrying off orphans that we would sell dvarim shebekdusha, but also for pidyon shvuyim. However, however, the Chavetz Chaim does tell us to look later on in Sif Yud Gimel, and specifically at the words of the Magen Avram, Demuchach, where he proves, De'ein roi limkar, it is not proper to sell, afilu beis hakneses, even a beis hakneses. Now, when the Chavetz Chaim says afilu beis hakneses, that's because remember what we learned earlier in Sif Beis. In Sif Beis, when we spoke about the varying levels of Kedusha, the lowest one that we discussed was a Beis HaKnesses. Beis HaKnesses, a shul, was at the bottom of the totem pole. So you had a Beis HaKnesses, then you had a Teva, an Aron Kodesh, or a bima, and we said only a bima that you put an uncovered Sefer Torah directly upon. La'afuke, if the Sefer Torah is always covered, or the bima has a cover, in that case the bima is not on the same level as the Aron Kodesh, because the Sefer Torah does not come into contact with it. So first we have a Beis HaKnesses. Then we have an Aron Kodesh and a bima. Then we have a mantle and a gartel of a Sefer Torah. Then ultimately we had in the middle over there we had Sifrei Kedusha. We had Chamoshim and Nevi'im and Ksuvim that are written Begalila. So again, it was Beis HaKnesses, Aron Kodesh, and Bima. After that, we had a mantle or a gartel. Then we had Sifrei Kedusha, like Chamoshim and Nevi'im and Ksuvim. And then ultimately we had a Sefer Torah. So now over here, the Mishnah Berurah is bringing down from the Magen Avram, V'ayin l'kamon b'sif yud gimel b'Magen Avram sham demuchach, de'ein roi limkar afilu beis hakneses. Even the lowest level of the dvarim shebekdusha, the shul, we don't even sell a shul. V'afilu l'pidyon shvuyim. Not even for the great need of pidyon shvuyim. Unless it is impossible to raise the money from the tzibur in any other way. That's the only time that you go ahead and sell dvarim shebekdusha in order to raise money for pidyon shvuyim. If you can't raise the money in any other way, then it is certainly mutter to sell dvarim shebekdusha for pidyon shvuyim. Afilu b'she'elehem rak beis hakneses achas, even if there will no longer be a functioning Beis HaKnesses Kavua in the city. So the Mishnah Berurah over here is telling me a kula and a chumrah. What he's telling me is it's not proper to sell any davar shebekdusha, even for pidyon shvuyim, unless there's no other way out. If there's no other way to raise the money for the pidyon shvuyim, then you could sell a davar shebekdusha. And if there's no other way to raise the money for the pidyon shvuyim except for the selling of a davar shebekdusha, then you could sell a shul even if there is no other shul in the town. You could still go ahead and sell the shul. But you don't do this unless there's no other way out. Now, I want to point out something, and that is that, very interesting, if you take a look back at Lamed Hey Amud Aleph in Siman Beis, the Mechaber said in Siman Beis, B'nei ha'ir shemachru beis hakneses, if the people of this city sold a beis hakneses. And the Mishnah Berurah in Ois Katan Gimel pointed out that the Mechaber is using a lashon di'eved. If they already sold a beis hakneses, now we're going to discuss the restrictions that there are on the proceeds of the sale. So it's a lashon b'di'eved. If they already did it, sounds like lechatchila they shouldn't do it. Said the Mishnah Berurah in Ois Katan Gimel on Lamed Hey Amud Aleph, Va'afilu lechatchila nami mutar limkar kedei liknois ilui kedusha. The Mishnah Berurah pointed out in Ois Cotton Gimel that even lechatchila, it's mutter to sell a davar shebekdusha if you're going to level up the proceeds of the sale. So that means that it's even lechatchila, you're allowed to sell an Aron Kodesh in order to buy a mantle for a Sefer Torah. Why? Because you're leveling up the proceeds. So once you're leveling up the proceeds, says the Mishnah Berurah, it's mutter even lechatchila. Yet, over here, the Mishnah Berurah is telling me, from the Magen Avram, that you don't sell even a Beis HaKnesses, which is the lowest level of a davar shebekdusha. You don't sell even a Beis HaKnesses, even for Pidyon Shvuyim. And Pidyon Shvuyim, we are putting all the way up there at the top. Why? Because Pidyon Shvuyim is equal to Aspakas Talmidim. Pidyon Shvuyim is equal to Lahasi Yisaimim. So we're putting Pidyon Shvuyim all the way at the top. Yet the Magen Avram is saying, Ein Roi, it's not proper to sell even a Beis HaKnesses, even for Pidyon Shvuyim, unless there's no other way out. Now wait a second, why not? In the beginning of the Siman, the Chavetz Chaim told me it's mutar lechatchila to sell dvarim shebekdusha if you're leveling up the money. And Pidyon Shvuyim is certainly considered leveling up the money. So it seems, and we're going to see this later on when we get to Sif Yud Gimel, it seems that even though it is mutar lechatchila to sell a davar shebekdusha if you're going to level up the proceeds, there still is an inyan of ein roi lasos. It's not something that is appropriate to do. It's not appropriate to sell a davar shebekdusha, apparently, even if you're going to level up with the proceeds. Now, of course, if it's chazi beit tiyua, if you have some kind of problem that you need to rectify, so for example, if it's not just pshat that you're going to level up, it's pshat that you're filling a need. So let's say, for example, you have a shul that has an extra bima, and they want to sell the bima, and with the proceeds of the bima, they want to buy sifrei neviim that are written beglila on klaf. They want to buy a Yeshaya on klaf, because until now they never had a klaf to lane the HaTorah out of, and now they want to level up and they want to start laning the HaTorah from a klaf. So over there, that's chazi beit tiyua. That's a problem. We're lacking something. There's something that we don't have, and that's why we want to level up. Or they want to sell an extra Aron Kodesh in order to help raise funds to buy a Sefer Torah, because the only Sefer Torah that they have is a Sefer Torah that's, it's not in the greatest shape, and they keep stopping the laning on Shabbos because the Baal Korah is not sure if the Sefer Torah is kosher or not. So that's chazi beit tiyua. If it's chazi beit tiyua, then I don't see a problem. I don't think the Magen Avram would say ein roi lasos. But there's this interesting dichotomy over here, where on the one hand, in the beginning of the Siman, we say it's mutar lechatchila to sell dvarim shebekdusha if you're going to level up. At the same time, the Magen Avram is saying over here, ein roi. You don't sell for even Pidyon Shvuyim unless there's no way out. And just to show you that my diuk over here, I think, is an accurate diuk, take a look at the Sharitzia in Ois Cotton Tezvav. The Mishnah Berurah brought down over here for the Magen Avram, de ein roi limkar afilu beis hakneses, va'afilu lepidyon shvuyim. Says the Chavetz Chaim in the Sharitzia in Ois Cotton Tezvav, v'cholshke l'shar kedusha chamura u'lahaspakas talmidim. Pidyon shvuyim is the zenith. That's the top level Pidyon Shvuyim. So when the Magen Avram says that it's not roi to sell a davar shebekdusha for Pidyon Shvuyim unless there's no way out, it's also not roi to sell a davar shebekdusha for any other kedusha chamura. So you want to level up a bima to a Sefer Torah, it's not roi, the Magen Avram would say. You don't sell a davar shebekdusha even to level up unless there's no other way out. Okay. Now let's go on to Sif Zayin, 3 lines down in the Shulchan Aruch, end of the line. Says the Mechaber, V'ha de Beis HaKnesses nimkar. this halacha that a shul could be sold, Hani Mili, well, you know what? Break for a second. Let's go into the Mishnah Berurah at the beginning of Siman Zion, where you'll see that the Mishnah Berurah gives a little bit of a hakdama to this Siman. Says the Mishnah Berurah. To this Sif, not to this Siman. Says the Mishnah Berurah. Hine mipnei shehasif Zion yesh by kama pratim. Since Sif Zion has a lot of details to it, says the Mishnah Berurah. Mipnei shehasif Zion yesh by kama pratim. Since Sif Zion has a lot of details, lochein therefore aktim lazeh haktama kitzara. I'm going to give a short hakdama to this Sif. V'hu, and that is Tamasha niskar le'el me'inyin mechiras beis hakneses. This whole discussion that we're having about selling a beis hakneses, and this discussion that we had on Lamed Hey Amud Aleph and Sif Beis about selling a beis hakneses and what you could do with the proceeds. Hani Mili, this is only germane imhu shel kfar, if we're talking about a beis hakneses of a small village. Distama bina'u rak adaita didhu. When we're talking about a shul in a small village, we can assume that the shul was built for the purposes of the people who live in the village. That's the only point of this shul. You have a small town, a small village, the townspeople got together, they built themselves a shul. And therefore, yesh yechelis biyad roiv b'nei ha'ir lamachroi. Since the shul was built for the purposes of the townspeople, of the people of this village, they could get together, and if a majority decides that they want to sell the shul, they could sell the shul. But there's just a caveat. They could decide that they want to sell the shul, but when they do, the restrictions of Sif Beis kick in, where the proceeds of the sale, they have to level them up. They can't level them down. But if the sale of the shul in this small village or this small town was not only done by the townspeople, it was done by the townspeople with the agreement of the Shiva Tuvei Ha'ir. What are the Shiva Tuvei Ha'ir? Literally, it means the 7 good people of the city. We're going to see that the Shiva Tuvei Ha'ir, it doesn't literally mean the good people of the city. They don't have to be the Talmidei Chachamim. They don't have to be the Gevirim. They don't have to be the tied-in politicians. The Shiva Tuvei Ha'ir means the 7 committee members or the 7 board members that were appointed by the townspeople to be kind of the Gizbarim, the officers that are in charge of the Tzibur Dika matters. So, what the Mishnah Berurah is telling us over here so far is, when we're talking about the townspeople getting together and selling the shul, that's in a small town. In a small town, the Royev B'nei Ha'ir, the majority of the townspeople, could get together, and they could decide to sell the shul. If they decide to sell the shul, the proceeds will be encumbered by the restrictions of Sif Beis. They'll have to level up the monies. But if they make the sale together with the agreement of the board of the Shiva Tuvei Ha'ir, then the proceeds of the sale are not even encumbered by the restrictions of Sif Beis. They could do with the money whatever they want. They could even use the money for mundane things. Maybe it has to be for tzarchei tzibur. We'll have to see. But it could be they can make a big kiddush with the money. They could mamish use it for chulin, k'de'isa l'kamei, like we're going to learn later on. So these halachos, says the Chavetz Chaim, are by a beis hakneses in a small town or a small village, and that's when he says we have 2 levels. If the B'nei Ha'ir sell the shul, so then they could sell the shul, but the proceeds are encumbered by the restrictions of Sif Beis. If they sell it together with the agreement of the Shiva Tuvei Ha'ir, then the proceeds are not even encumbered by the restrictions of Sif Beis. Then they could mamish be moitzi the mois l'chulin. Aval, however, continues the Chavetz Chaim, Imu Beis HaKnesses Shel Krachim, if we're talking about a shul in a big city, Talinon, then we assume the Be'ez HaBinyan, that at the time the shul was built, Banuhu, they built it, Gam Adaita de Kule Alma. When you build a shul in a big city, you build a shul in Borough Park, you build a shul in Flatbush, you build a shul in Lakewood, you build a shul in Yerushalayim, then the assumption is that the shul was not built just for the townspeople. Then the shul was built for all the people of the world. Why? Because you're building a shul in a metropolis. You're building a shul in a place that people from all over the world are constantly coming. I'm thinking in my mind, Landau's in Flatbush. Landau's in Flatbush on Avenue L. People from all over daven in Landau's. They all know I got to go into Brooklyn tomorrow morning. Where can I get a minion? Landau's. In Passaic, the Avas. People from all over count on the Avas. They know that you're going to Passaic, Minion Factory, Avas. Borough Park, Bobov, Shemer Shabbos. Lakewood. It's funny. I'm not such a Lakewood person. The names of the shuls in Lakewood escape me. I know which shul I'm thinking of. It's the one that has these white, very narrow, long rooms. That's a Minion Factory that everybody davens in. Muncie, Vishnitz. Every town has its places where there's a Minion Factory. So says the Mishnah Berurah, when you build a shul in a krach, when you build a shul in a big city, the assumption is that shul was not built for just the people who live around there. That shul was built for everybody in the world. What's the nafkamina? Says the Mishnah Berurah, and this is true, Va'afilu im nasnu kol mois habinyan mishalahem. This is true even though all the money that was used to build the shul came from the local people. Still and all, we assume that the shul was built al das the whole world. Afilu haki talinan, we still assume the bishvil kulam banu, that the shul was built for everybody in the world. V'lachein, and therefore, afilu hiskimu achakach b'mechirasai shiva tuvei o'ir b'maimer anshe o'ir. Since in a metropolis we assume that the shul was built for the whole world, even if all the people of the city agreed to sell the shul, and the shiva tuvei o'ir, the board agrees to sell the shul, b'maimer anshe o'ir, by a meeting of all the people of the city, ein mechirasan mechira, their sale is not a valid sale, it's not a binding sale. Why? Because they have no right to sell it. It's not theirs to sell. You build a shul in a derfel, you build a shul in a little winkel, in a little village, in a little town. So then it's up to the townspeople. So if the townspeople sell it, it's sold, and the proceeds are encumbered by the restrictions of Sif Beis. If the townspeople sell it with the agreement of the Shiva Tuvei O'ir, it's a sale, and they can even be might see the money to Chulin. But when you have a shul in a krach, a shul in a city, now, even if you sell it with everybody's agreement of the city, with all the city people's agreement, with the agreement of the Shiva Tuvei O'ir, it's not a sale, because that shul belongs to the world. It doesn't belong just to the locals. Now, we're going to have to see what's called a big city, what's called a krach, what's called a village. And we'll see that momentarily. Now, with that hakdama, let's see Siv Zayin. Siv Zayin, 3 lines down on Lamed Vav Amud Aleph, near the end of the line, says the Mechaber. V'ha de Beis HaKnesses nimkar, this idea that a shul could be sold, Hani mili shel kfarim, that's when you're talking about the shul of a small village. She'ein boyim anoshim mimekaymes acherim, where people are not coming to daven there from other places. Shaloi naseis ela lebnei akfarim levadam. So that shul was only made for the townspeople. And the Ramah says, Va'afilu bana isa mishal acherim. And this is true even if the people in the village took donations from people outside the village. So people in a small town somewhere in Pennsylvania built themselves a little shul, and they took donations. They made a online charity campaign, and they took donations from all over the place. Still, the shul was built for the people in that small town. It's very nice that people wanted to make donations to help them out to the building of the shul. But the shul was built for the townspeople, and that's why they could decide what to do. Continues the Mechaber. V'lachein, and therefore yechelim l'machrei. They're able to sell it. Umikam makayim, but nevertheless, even though they could sell it, hama'is nisharim b'kedushasan, the money retains its kedusha, and it's encumbered by the restrictions of Sif Beis. Ve'enam rashan l'hayridan mikdushasan, so they can't level down the kedusha of the money, they have to level it up. And even that restriction, says the Mechaber, v'hainu kishemachru b'nei ha'ir sheloim b'das parnaseim. That's when the townspeople sold it without the agreement of the board, without the agreement of the Shiva Tuvei Ha'ir. V'hu adin im machru Shiva Tuvei Ha'ir shaloi b'maimed anshe ha'ir. Or the same thing would be true if the board, the Shiva Tuvei Ha'ir, if they sold the shul without the townspeople. So if the townspeople sold it without the Shiva Tuvei Ha'ir, or the Shiva Tuvei Ha'ir sold it without the townspeople, the sale is a good sale, but the proceeds are encumbered by the restrictions of Sif Beis. Aval im hiskimu Shiva Tuvei Ha'ir ba'isei mecher. But if the board agreed to the sale, v'hayu b'maimed anshe ha'ir, and the sale was done together with a gathering of the people of the city, Rasham l'hoitziamois l'chol ma sheyirtzu. Then they could even make a party. They could use the money for whatever they want. It's not encumbered by Sif Beis. Now let's break over there for a minute. So far, what did we see over here in Sif Zayin? We didn't see yet the exception. That's going to come later. That's going to be tomorrow's share. So far, what we saw over here in Sif Zayin is the Mechaber is telling us this concept that you could go ahead and you could sell a shul. That's buy a shul in a small village. A shul in a small village, we assume that the shul was built only for the purposes of the townspeople and the village people, therefore they have the right to sell it. Now that they have the right to sell it, what are the guidelines of their sale? So the Mechaber gave us over here a few different madregas. He said the Bnei Ha'ir, the people of the city, could decide themselves to sell it without the Shiva Tuvei Ha'ir. If they do that, then the sale is a good sale, but the money retains its kedusha and it's encumbered by the restrictions of Sif Beis. Or the Shiva Tuvei Ha'ir could go ahead. The board could go ahead and sell it without the Bnei Ha'ir, and again, it's going to be encumbered by the restrictions of Sif Beis. Or the people of the town, the people of the village could sell it with the agreement of the Shiva Tuvei Ha'ir, with the agreement of the board, and in that case, the sale is a good sale, and they could use the money for anything. They could even be moitzi it l'chulin. Okay, we saw the Hakdama of the Mishnah Berurah. Now let's go to the Mishnah Berurah back in Lamed Vav Amud Aleph, Ois Katan Chav Hey. So we're talking over here, when we talk about selling a shul, Shal Kfarim, we're talking about the shul of a village. Now, what constitutes a village and what constitutes a big city? Says the Mishnah Berurah, Ve'eskimo achrayim, the achrayim reach a conclusion. The ba'asra, the loish, this is a little bit nuanced over here, what the Mishnah Berurah says, and he's bringing this down from a Masas Binyamin. It looks to me like there's a Pnei Yehoshua that disagrees, but let's see what the Mishnah Berurah says from the Masas Binyamin, but it's a little nuanced, so pay attention. What's called a kfar and what's called a krach? Says the Mishnah Berurah, Ve'eskimo achrayim, the achrayim reach a consensus, the ba'asra the loish chichi rabim da'ase me alma. In a place, in a town, the ba'asra, in an area, the loish chichi rabim da'ase me alma, where it's not common to have a lot of people who come from outside the city, nikra kvar. That's called a village. Afal gav, even though the shchichi rabim oivrim vishavim liprokim, even though there are people passing through. There's a rabbim. Even though there are many people who are passing in and out, keven deloy kvi ba'ir, since these people are not coming to stay in the city, ela oivrim v'shavim, they're just passing through derech harai mikri kvar. That's what's called a kvar. Okay? Now let's now see how the Mishnah Berurah explains the opposite of that. So he says like this: a kvar is considered a kvar, a village is considered a small village, even though there might be a lot of people passing through, right? They're passing through, but since they're not coming and staying in the city, that makes it a kvar. Omnam, however, kol mokem d'shchiche rabim me'alma, any place where there are a lot of people coming from outside, shebon lihispal sham, and they're coming to daven there. Kegoin, for example, mokem sha'asoichrim miskaptzim sham tadir l'schoira. Let's say there's a place where a lot of people come because that's where the market is. Afilu ima'ir hiktana, even if it's a small city. Or another case, mokem sheyesh sham chacham gadol. Maybe it is a major Talmid Chacham who lives there. So a lot of people come there to seek the counsel of the Talmid Chacham. Heavy krach. That's a krach. The mistama adaita the kala oila banu. Because then the shul that's there was built for the people of the whole world. So I think the nuanced distinction that the Mishnah Berurah is making is like this. There's two different possibilities of why you may have a lot of people from outside the town coming and davening in the town. One is that it's a good pit stop. So in my mind, I don't know that this is the case, but in my mind I could imagine. Let's say somebody's traveling from Lakewood to Brooklyn. People travel from Lakewood to Brooklyn, and they moan and they groan about the fact that they have to drive through the Staten Island Expressway. The Staten Island Expressway is renowned for its traffic. But the bottom line is that Staten Island is a through point going from Lakewood to Brooklyn, or from Lakewood to Manhattan. It might be a good place to chapa shachris. It might be a good place to chapa mincha. But why are you going there? You're not going there because you want to be in Staten Island. You're not going there because there's something in Staten Island that you're looking for. You're going there because it's a through point. It's a waypoint. That's what it is. I need a place to daven. It's a nice middle of the trip stop, so it's a pit stop. I'll roll in, park the car, daven chakras, hop back into the car, and go. That, the Mishnah Berurah seems to be saying, that's a kfar. Because nobody is coming here to be here. So I didn't build the shul for you. It's very nice that you're using me as a bus stop. It's very nice that you're using me as a pit stop. But you're not coming to Staten Island. So I didn't build the shul to serve you. Okay, you looked on the map, you looked at Waze, you looked at Google Maps. You figured out that this is a convenient place for you to stop. Now there's another case. The other case is that people are coming here because there's something here that they want. Maybe they'll stop in Staten Island by the yeshiva community in Staten Island because they want to go see Meiri Varabi Rebruin Feinstein Shlita. So they want to come and they want to ask him an eitzah. They want to come and they want to get a bracha. In that case, they're coming for here. So now I know that I'm a destination. If I'm a destination, then Mistama, when we built the shul for the people who come from all over the world. You see, that's the word. This is the siyata d'shmaya of saying a shir. Because this second, it popped into my mind. It's a matnas elikim. It's not because of me. It's a siyata d'shmaya the Rebbeinu Shalom just put in my brain right now exactly the way to say this. The difference is, are you a destination or are you a through point? Or are you a waypoint? If you're a destination, there's a Rebbe here, there's a Talmid Chacham here, there's a market here. So then you're a destination. If you're a destination, then we assume that when you built the shul having in mind all the people from all over the world who come to this destination. If you're just a waypoint, that it happens to be a convenient place to stop at daven chakras, then we didn't build the shul for you. We built the shul for us. So that's the difference how you determine what's a krach, what's a city, where we assume that the shul was built for all the people of the world, and therefore the people in the city can't just decide to sell it. Or are you a kvar? Or are you a little village or a little town, and therefore the people in the town have the right to decide to sell it? Okay, we're in the middle of Ois Katla Chafei over here. Oid Kasra Paiskim. In my Mishnah Berurah, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 lines off the bottom, near the beginning of the line. Oid Kasra Paiskim. Further, the Paiskim write, Da'afilu Beis HaKnesses. I just want to break for 1 second and mention, I have Yartzeit tonight. So most people, I'm recording this on Thursday evening. I have a feeling most people are going to be using this shir either Thursday night or Friday morning. I have Yartzeit this week on Erev Shabbos. So I'd like to say that the limud HaTorah should be a schus, le'ili nishmas avi Meiri, Reb Aaron Tzvi ben Reb Meir, Olav Shalom, my father, and Yibadol L'chaim, my mother, have the schus really for all the Torah that I and my brothers teach. And believe me, between myself and my 3 brothers, we teach a tremendous amount of Torah. My oldest brother, of Moshe Meir, Zolzain Gesund and Stark, is renowned for his shiurim and his lectures. My second brother, of Yosef Asher, Zolzain Gesund, is the last hand that touches just about every single art scroll sefer that has ever been printed and is printed. And I'm talking about things like the Shas, the Yerushalmi, the Hebrew Shas, you name it, the Taisvis, the Archaim HaKadosh, the Palayoyitz, you name it, the Chinuch, the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, everything. He is the last hand that touches all of them. And my youngest brother, Rabbi Yitzchak Zelig, Zolzain Gesund Stark, also propagates a tremendous amount of Torah. If the world is all aware of Reb Sroli Borenstein's unbelievable Daf Yomi share and how many hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people that listen to it, my brother is an adherent of the Shul, but not only that, he's always sending out the Mara Mekaimis, and he's always sending out Chidushim to the people in the share. He speaks publicly, etc., etc. So there's a tremendous amount of limud HaTorah and Talmud Torah that comes out, and it all goes back to my father, Yibadol L'chaim, my mother. So the schus of the shir should serve as a schus l'ili nishmas of Yimeri, Rabbi Aaron Tzvi ben Reb Meir, Olav Shalom. Oid kasra paiskim. The paiskim write further. Da'afilu beis hakneses shebekrach. Even when we are talking about a shul in a city, and what we're saying is that a shul in a city, the people in the city cannot necessarily go ahead and sell it, because it's not up to them. It was built for the whole world. But there is an exception, says the Mishnah Berurah. Da'afilu beis hakneses shebekrach. Im yadua, if it is known, shelo ya'asu isa ela lema'atam, if we know that the shul was not built for the whole world, if we know that the shul was built for a select group of people, kigoin, for example, back in the day, there used to be the carpenter's shul, the leather tanner's shul, the tailor's shul, the Schneider's shtiebel. That was the tailor's shul. Now, there was very often very practical reasons for that. There were certain trades that had to start very early in the morning, so they made minyanim early. So there were reasons why there were minyanim that were made specifically for certain trades. But in that case, v'hu adin, or likewise, says the Mishnah Berurah, kisheniskapsu abalibatim shel ezer rechoiv, maybe the people who live on one street, harachuk min beis hakneses shebe'ir, it's a street where there happen to be a lot of Yidden living, and it's very far away from the main shul. So they made their own little shul. In that case, even though this is a shul in a krach, Gam kein dinoi kebeis hakneses shel kvarim. This would have the din of a beis hakneses of a kvar, afilu hu bekrach, even though it's in a big city. De mistama rakal das atzman banu. Because over there the assumption is they built it for themselves. So if you have in Lakewood, in Borough Park, in Flatbush, you have on one particular, let's say in Lakewood, you have one of these little cookie cutter housing complexes. I'm not talking about Westgate. I'm not talking about one of the big ones. Maybe you have a small cul-de-sac and there's 18 families living in it. So there's 20 people. And everybody knows that they took one of the basements. They got together. They made a shul. That, it's very hard to say that they made it al das kule alma. They didn't make that for the whole world. They're living in a little derfel and they wanted to make their own minyan. So then it's well known that they made their own minyan. In that case, the halacha is the mistama rakal das atzman banu, and they would be able to sell it. Unless other people from the city donated money to it. Even if it was only a little bit. In that case, they wouldn't be able to sell it without the agreement of those people who went ahead and donated to the cause. Let's do at least one more Mishnah Berurah over here. There are must stuck in the words that when you have a basic nessus of a kfar, when you have a basic nessus of a small town, then they're allowed to sell it. And the Rabbah said, "Afilu bana isami shalacherim," even if they took donations from outside. The Mishnah Berurah says, "The mistama acherim nastu lehem amois," because we assume that the people who donated it gave it to them. Sheyasu heim behem ashayirtzu, that they should do with it what they want. Kevin Chain Regilus Lavasham. The town in Pennsylvania ran an online charity campaign. The person who lives in Borough Park gave $18. He didn't give $18 for this shul somewhere in the Poconos because he thought he was going to use it. And therefore, even if those outside donors aren't maskim, they're allowed to sell it. We're going to stop over here. Thank you so much for joining me for limud HaTorah. The schus of limud HaTorah should be made against Klal Yisrael. The Rosh Hashanah should send Yeshuas, Refuas, Parnasa, and Shidduchim to all those in need. And we should be Zaycha to see the Bias Tzedek, B'mehera v'yameinu, Amen. Be well.